Welcome to another episode of PPL Pod. Picture this. You're the lead singer of U2 or Coldplay.
Right, so you're absolute rock royalty.
Exactly. You're selling out stadiums worldwide, and you're widely considered, the undisputed kings of serious rock music.
Yeah, you've made it.
You've made it. And yet, when an interviewer asks you who is making the most cutting-edge, like a boundary-pushing music of the decade, you don't name some gritty underground indie band.
Or tortured acoustic artists.
Right. You don't name them either. You name a girl group that was literally manufactured on a reality TV show, a group that, at the time, has their own line of branded false eyelashes.
It sounds like a total punchline.
It really does, but it actually happened. So the central tension we are unpacking today in this deep dive is how a group born from the, highly artificial, disposable machine of reality television ends up completely redefining modern pop music.
And winning the unironic respect of rock snobs, which is not easy.
Not at all. And leaving behind this massive legacy that spans over 2 decades now.
It's honestly one of the most phenomenal contradictions in modern music history. So today's deep dive is all about the British-Irish girl group, Girls Aloud.
Girls Aloud, yeah.
Formed back in 2002. And they didn't just survive the infamous reality TV curse, where you burn bright for 5 minutes and then fade into a pub trivia question.
Right, like whatever happened to so-and-so.
Exactly. They completely dismantled that curse. We are talking about a group that achieved a staggering, record-breaking string of 20 consecutive top 10 singles in the UK.
20 consecutive top 10s. I mean, that kind of run, it isn't a fluke. That is a carefully engineered dynasty right there.
It really is.
And even if you aren't typically a pop music fan, this is just a fascinating case study in subversion, because it's the story of how a supposedly manufactured group managed to Trojan horse incredibly weird avant-garde experimental music right onto the mainstream charts.
Well, the general public was just too busy dancing to notice the rules being broken.
Yeah. So set the scene for us. Where does this all start?
So to understand the sheer scale of that subversion, we have to travel back to late 2002. The UK television network ITV was airing a reality show called Pop Stars, The Rivals.
Okay, The Rivals.
Yeah, and the entire premise of this show was conflict by design. The goal was to manufacture a boy band, who ended up being called One True Voice, and a girl group, which was Girls Aloud.
Right.
And then the network would release both of their debut singles on the exact same day, pitting them against each other in this massive race for the 2002 UK Christmas #1 single.
Okay, we should probably pause here just to explain the whole Christmas #1 thing.
Oh, yeah, that's crucial.
Because to an outsider, it might just sound like another week on the Billboard charts. But in the UK, the Christmas #1 is a massive cultural institution.
It's a huge deal.
Right. It's the one week of the year where the entire nation, like people who never usually buy music, goes out and buys a single.
Yeah, my grandma would buy a single that week.
Exactly. It's highly competitive. It's all over the news. It is the most prestigious chart battle of the year. So throwing 2 newly minted, entirely untested groups into that specific arena, that's an astronomical amount of pressure.
It was an absolute crucible. I mean, if you think about the really intense, hyper-competitive trainee survival shows in modern K-pop.
Oh, yeah, those are brutal.
Right. Well, Pop Stars. The Rivals was basically an early, localized version of that exact machinery, but playing out on live terrestrial television every single Saturday night.
Wow.
You had thousands of applicants turning up for auditions, being judged by industry heavyweights, and after weeks of these grueling public eliminations, 5 women finally made the cut.
Cheryl, Nadine Coyle, Nicola Roberts, Kimberly Walsh, and Sarah Harding.
Exactly. And they were immediately thrown into the deep end against this boy band.
And the narrative was heavily stacked against them, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. Boy bands usually have this built-in, highly dedicated demographic that's willing to buy, multiple copies of a single just to ensure their victory.
Right, the super fans. But Girls Aloud didn't just win the battle for Christmas #1. They completely annihilated One True Voice.
They really did.
I mean, their debut single, Sound of the Underground, it spent 4 consecutive weeks at the top of the charts. It was an instant cultural phenomenon.
Which brings us to the real mystery here.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, winning a reality show and getting a #1 single, that's kind of the standard trajectory for these television formats.
Yeah, the show does the marketing for you.
Right. But historically, that initial spike of fame is a death sentence for longevity. The public just moves on to the next shiny thing.
Usually these shows pump out a very specific generic product that fizzles out in 6 months. It's like a factory assembly line.
Exactly. So the mechanism that kept Girls Aloud from becoming a one-hit wonder was actually the production team they were paired with. Specifically, a producer named Brian Higgins and his songwriting and production house, Xenomania.
Okay, Xenomania. I was reading about their process, and it sounds less like a traditional recording studio and more like a chaotic hit factory laboratory.
That is the perfect way to describe it.
Because usually, you think of a songwriter sitting at a piano, writing a verse, then a chorus, then a bridge. But Xenomania basically threw that entire blueprint out the window.
Oh, they shredded it. Higgins absolutely hated the standard pop formula. His whole methodology was entirely based on disjointed experimentation.
How did that even work?
Well, he would have different writers in totally different rooms of his studio working on completely separate musical ideas
At the same time.
at the same time. So one room might be writing a moody synth line, another might be writing an aggressive punk rock guitar riff, and another room might just be working on a pure pop vocal hook.
That sounds like a mess.
It does. But then Higgins would take all these disparate elements and manually stitch the best 10 seconds of each idea together. He would completely ignore standard chord progressions or traditional song structures.
That makes so much sense when you listen to what is widely considered their masterpiece, the song Biology.
Yes, biology is the perfect example.
Because if you try to map out the structure of Biology, it's baffling. It doesn't follow the verse-chorus rule at all.
Not even a little bit.
Listening to it is almost like scrolling through TikTok. Like every 15 seconds, the genre, the tempo, the melody, they all completely change to keep your brain hooked.
Yeah.
But somehow, instead of sounding like a mess, it all feels like one cohesive feed. You have these bluesy piano riffs smashing into synth pop, which then dissolves into something else entirely.
That's a brilliant analogy. Critics at the time actually noted that it sounded like three completely separate melodies mashed together. Xenomania was physically constructing these songs to be unpredictable.
And it worked.
It did. And what made it even more radical was the specific sonic palette they were pulling from. In the early 2000s, there was this really rigid divide between commercial pop music and the rising indie rock scene like the Strokes and the Libertines.
Right, pop was pop and rock was rock. Never the twain shall meet.
Exactly. But Higgins saw that divide and just decided to blur the edges.
He started taking indie rock sensibilities and wrapping them in a shiny, aggressive pop package.
Yep.
For example, the backing track for their massive hit Love Machine, that was heavily inspired by the jangly, melancholy guitar rock of the Smiths.
Which is wild.
Right. You do not expect a reality TV girl group to be pulling musical inspiration from Morrissey and Johnny Marr.
You really don't. And another early single, No Good Advice, features this driving guitar riff that Higgins himself noted was purposefully similar to the indie band Franz Ferdinand.
Wow.
Yeah. They were borrowing the raw energy and the instrumentation of the underground rock scene.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second.
Go for it.
If Brian Higgins and Xenomania are these like mad scientists in the studio, physically cutting and pasting hundreds of vocal takes and guitar riffs into these bizarre stitched together tracks, or the girls just passengers? I mean, you could theoretically plug any 5 competent singers into that machine and get the same result, couldn't you? Like, how much of the success was the producers and how much was the actual group?
It's the most common criticism aimed at manufactured pop. But in this specific case, it really doesn't hold up.
Really? Why not?
Because the relationship between Xenomania and Girls Aloud was deeply symbiotic. Think about the sheer complexity of a song like Biology. If you handed that frantic, genre-jumping track to a generic pop singer, it would sound ridiculous.
It would probably fall flat, yeah.
Exactly. It required the massive personalities, the sheer attitude, and the highly distinct vocal deliveries of Cheryl, Nadine, Nicola, Kimberly, and Sarah to anchor the chaos.
They had to sell it.
They did. The renowned music critic Alexis Petridis summed it up perfectly when reviewing their debut. He called it a reality pop record that didn't make you want to do physical harm to everyone involved in its manufacture.
That is incredibly high praise from a notoriously tough music critic.
It really is.
It's like the producers built this wildly unpredictable, overpowered sports car, but it required these 5 specific women to grip the steering wheel and actually drive the thing without crashing it into a wall.
That's exactly it. And drive it they did. This critical acclaim wasn't just confined to music journalism circles, It translated into an absolute commercial juggernaut.
Oh, yeah.
If we look at their peak era, roughly between 2006 and 2009, Girls Aloud weren't just a band anymore. They were an entire industry. By 2010, they had amassed a collective fortune of around £30 million.
30 million. And the scale of their merchandising is just mind-blowing. They weren't just selling CDs and concert t-shirts.
No, no, no.
They partnered with Mattel to produce their own line of fashion fever Barbies, where each member designed their doll's outfit.
So cool.
They signed deals to be the faces of a Nintendo DS advertising campaigns. They had a £1.25 million deal with Sunsilk Hair Care, where each of the 5 members literally had their own specific shampoo formulated for them.
Which is such a brilliant marketing move.
Right. They even teamed up with Eyelure to design their own ranges of false eyelashes. They were inescapable.
Which creates a really fascinating cultural paradox.
How so?
Well, usually when a pop act becomes that heavily branded and commercialized, the serious music industry turns its back on them.
Oh, for sure. They get labeled as sellouts, corporate shills.
Exactly. But with Girls Aloud, at the exact same time they were selling false eyelashes and Kit Kat bars, they were achieving massive, undeniable industry validation.
Right. In 2008, they released their album Out of Control, which became their most successful studio album, eventually going double platinum.
Yeah.
And the lead single from that album, The Promise, is this lush 1960s style track that actually won them a Brit Award for Best British Single in 2009.
And The Promise is a great example of their evolution. Xenomania leaned heavily into a Phil Spector influence for that track.
The Wall of Sound.
Yes, the Wall of Sound. For listeners who might not be familiar with that term, Phil Spector was famous in the 1960s for creating this production technique where you layer dozens of instruments.
Just piling them on.
Right, piling 3 pianos, 5 acoustic guitars, and a whole brass section on top of each other, all playing the exact same notes, until the song sounds absolutely massive, cinematic, and almost overwhelming to the ear.
And Girls Aloud took that vintage, grandiose technique and just modernized it.
They did.
And it completely cemented this bizarre demographic crossover we were talking about earlier. You had teenagers buying their Barbie dolls, but you also had rock royalty bowing down to them.
Yeah, going back to your intro.
Exactly. Chris Martin, the frontman of Coldplay, publicly called them the ultimate form of life. Bonner from U2 declared that they were at the cutting edge of pop music. Think about how rare that is. When was the last time you saw a reality show pop act get unironic, massive respect from the lead singer of U2?
Never. And it wasn't just lip service from the older generation of rock stars either. You had credible contemporary indie bands like the Arctic Monkeys and Block Party actively covering Girls Aloud songs during their own live sets.
Which is amazing.
It proved that the underlying musical architecture of what Girls Aloud was doing was undeniably brilliant. The indie bands recognized the alternative rock influences that were cleverly hidden within the glossy pop presentation.
But, you know, maintaining that level of relentless output, the constant recording, the massive arena tours, the endless promotional campaigns for video games and shampoo, it eventually takes a physical and creative toll.
It does. You simply can't run at that speed forever.
No.
In 2009, they announced a hiatus to pursue solo projects. They did come back together briefly in 2012 to celebrate their 10th anniversary, releasing a greatest hits collection called 10 and embarking on a final tour before officially splitting in March 2013.
Right. And it felt like a natural, if bittersweet, conclusion to this historic run in British pop.
Yeah.
But the story of Girls Aloud obviously doesn't end there, and unfortunately the next chapter takes a deeply tragic turn.
It does. In August 2020, Sarah Harding shared the devastating news with the public that she had been diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. And despite undergoing intensive treatment, she revealed in early 2021 that the disease was terminal. She passed away on September 5th, 2021. She was only 39 years old.
It's just an incredibly heartbreaking loss. Anyone who watched their live performances or their interviews knows that Sarah was this massive, vibrant, chaotic energy.
Oh, completely.
She was basically the spark plug of the group.
She was often described by the media and by her bandmates as the rock and roll heart of Girls Aloud. Her loss was a profound shock to the industry and, of course, to their massive fan base.
I can only imagine.
But in the wake of her passing, the remaining 4 members eventually came together to honor her memory in the most fitting way possible. In 2024, they embarked on a massive reunion tour titled simply The Girls Aloud Show.
And we should really emphasize the sheer scale of this comeback. This wasn't some modest, nostalgic theater tour.
Not at all.
The Girls Aloud show became the biggest UK arena tour of 2024. The demand to see them and to collectively mourn and celebrate Sarah was overwhelming.
It was framed not just as a reunion, but as a dedicated celebration of Sarah and the music they had all created together. And what's truly fascinating and deeply moving is how they managed to incorporate her into the live shows and into their new releases.
How did they do that?
Well, while preparing for the tour and organizing their 20th anniversary projects, they went deep into the Xenomania recording vaults.
Oh, wait, they found unreleased vocal tracks, didn't they?
They did. They discovered previously unreleased lead vocals from Sarah, recorded many years prior.
Wow.
And this discovery allowed them to create a brand new studio version of a song they had originally covered in 2004, the Pretenders track, I'll Stand By You. They titled this new release, I'll Stand By You, Sarah's version.
Oh man, I can't even imagine the emotional weight of that process. Going back into the studio to sing pure, joyful, high-energy pop music when there's such a heavy, devastating absence in the room.
Yeah.
It transforms these catchy, upbeat pop songs into something much deeper, doesn't it? The context completely changes the art.
It adds a layer of profound emotional resonance that nobody could have anticipated back in 2002. And I'll Stand By You, Sarah's version, wasn't just a nostalgic tour highlight. It was actually released in late 2024 as the official BBC Children in Need single.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it brought their philanthropic efforts full circle because the original version of their cover had been the charity single exactly 20 years earlier. It gave fans one last, unexpected chance to hear Sarah take the lead.
It's a beautiful way to cement her legacy within the group, and it seems like that legacy is actively being reevaluated and celebrated right now.
Very much so.
We're seeing a massive wave of reissues that are treating their discography with the kind of reverence usually reserved for classic rock bands.
The appetite for their music has arguably never been stronger. They've been rolling out these extensive 20th anniversary reissues of their albums throughout 2024 and 2025.
And these aren't just simple represses, right?
No, these aren't just cash grabs. They are comprehensive archival projects packed with unheard demos, alternative cuts, and entirely new mixes. For instance, the 2025 reissue of their acclaimed Chemistry album includes something called the Singapore Definitive Edition.
I was looking into the liner notes for this. The Singapore track was newly mixed by Manon Grandjean and produced by Brian Higgins. And because they were digging through the vault, it actually features another newly discovered, unheard pre-chorus sung by Sarah.
It just shows how incredibly rich and deep their recording history was.
Yeah.
It highlights the sheer volume of material they generated during those Xenomania sessions. They even announced the standalone release of their 2005 collection of Christmas songs as a full album called Christmas Round at Ours in late 2025.
That's so fun.
Right, and outside the framework of the group, the individual members are still thriving in the entertainment industry. Nicola Roberts, for example, recently took on a major role in the West End production of the acclaimed musical Hadestown.
It's amazing to step back and look at the entire arc of this deep dive. If we go back to that opening tension we talked about, Girls Aloud fundamentally proved that manufactured pop does not automatically mean mindless pop.
That is the ultimate takeaway here. They started as literal pawns in a television network's ratings war. The industry entirely expected them to vanish after their first hit.
Like so many others.
But instead, armed with brilliant rule-breaking production and their own undeniable charisma, they completely rewrote the rulebook for British music. They left behind a catalog that is still rigorously studied by music critics for its structural complexity and fiercely adored by fans for its pure joy.
True innovation often hides in the most heavily commercialized, unexpected places. And it really leaves you with something to ponder.
Oh, for sure.
Because, we are currently entering an era where artificial intelligence and algorithms are starting to generate and heavily influence pop music formulas. It's easy to look at that and assume music will become completely sterile. But if the story of Girls Aloud tells us anything, perhaps the next great musical revolution won't come from an indie kid in a garage. Maybe it will come from someone intentionally breaking the rules from inside an algorithm, the rigid constraints, using the artificial machine to create something deeply human and entirely unexpected.
That is a fascinating thought.
Something to think about. Thanks for listening to Pipple Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.